she was going to take our daughter back to Poland, and that her family is a cult, that she was taking our daughter back to Poland because of mind control. She told me she had Stockholm syndrome, and she told me that her dad created a red herring so no one would believe me.
You said your own mother believes your ex-wife.
Yes.
What did your ex-wife say about you? Because obviously you said what you believe is your truth, which is that they've got a satanic cult and they've got your 3-year-old daughter in the satanic cult and they've abducted her and taken her to Poland without your permission. What was the story that they said about you? Do you think they could have done any kind of like magic on your mother and your father for them to have that standpoint?
I do think so. Once it got to the point where, okay, nobody's listening and nobody's gonna listen, and I've hit all of my bases. I've even written emails to President Obama. Then I'm just like, well, as a dad, I have to make them listen, and I don't know what the details of that are, but they're gonna listen to me. I didn't care if they never let me out of prison. All I cared about and care about is my daughter.
The Drazzy Show.
Well, I married into a satanic cult, and of course, I didn't know that that's what I was marrying into at the time. But as of today, my daughter and my first wife are still in this cult, and I have been fighting for recognition from the government, from the public, for almost 14 years now. And in the process, I had 7 years with my first wife, and I knew that something was wrong. I knew that something was off with her family. I lived in Poland at her parents' house, and I saw things, and I saw things in her. But it wasn't until my daughter was 3 years old, and she returned several times from my in-laws' house in Poland to my house with multiple signs of child abuse. And I tried to talk to my wife about it, and she was just completely unavailable. Uh, and I tried to get help from a psychologist. I had my wife go see a psychologist, and it was, when I was in the middle of it, it was almost impossible to deal with, because what I was dealing with was child abuse in my home, with my wife involved, and I had no idea what was happening. And on their last return from Poland in 2010, my wife immediately told me upon my return home that she was going to take our daughter back to Poland, and that her family is a cult, that she was taking our daughter back to Poland because of mind control. She told me she had Stockholm syndrome, and she told me that her dad created a red herring, that my drug, psychological and criminal histories would be used against me so no one would believe me. And I told her she was crazy. I had never heard of those things before. I couldn't consider that could be happening in my home. And for the next 3 weeks, I tried to get help. I tried to convince her to go with me to get help. I went to the police. I had the embassy, because I was living in the Netherlands. I had their directions in my back pocket. I was terrified trying to convince my wife to get help. And then 2 days after Christmas, my wife convinced me that she was going to the library with our daughter. I called my best friend, and about 10 minutes into that conversation, all of the things that she had been telling me hit me, and I knew they were gone. So I sprinted to the police department. The Dutch police wouldn't even take a police report. The U.S. Embassy told me that it was out of their jurisdiction and recommended that I reabduct my daughter and get her to the embassy, where I would then be on American soil, and they guaranteed me she would be evaluated.
So, hold on.
But not.
Sorry
Yes.
to cut you in. The Dutch police advised you to reabduct your daughter.
The U.S. Embassy did.
Oh wow!
The Dutch police wouldn't even give me the time of day. They didn't take a formal report, even though I went there 3 or 4 times, begging them to just stop my daughter from leaving the Netherlands. I wanted an evaluation in the Netherlands before they got to Poland, because I knew that once they were in Poland, it would be way more difficult. And my daughter was a resident of the Netherlands, so legally, one parent can't take the child from one country to another country. But I knew that was happening, And so I tried to have the Dutch police stop it. I tried to have the U.S. Embassy stop it, and none of them were able or willing, one or the other, to help.
Wow.
So I tried for the next 4 months, reaching out to my family, reaching out to every international organization I could find on the internet. But like my wife said, the red herring, which was the other story pointing the finger at me, was stronger than the story I was telling, because I was talking about ritual abuse and mind control and things that the public is not aware of. And I was living in Europe alone with my wife and my daughter. So when my wife got a hold of my parents, she was able to convince them that I was the problem and they had escaped from me. And my point was, I don't care what it is you think about me. Just please stop this from happening now and evaluate my child. Because at the time she was 3 going on 4 years old. And I knew that if they evaluated her, that in regards to my allegations, that then we could stop it at that point. But that didn't happen. I tried for 4 months to get help, and after 4 months, I I just decided that as a dad, I had to do something to press the issue. I had to try to force them to look at it. So I had flown back from the Netherlands to the United States, and I was staying at a friend's house, and my friends were saying, you have to do what you need to do. You have to do your best as a dad. And I thought about it for 4 months. So I sold my car and bought a ticket to Amsterdam and rented a car in Amsterdam, drove across to Poland, and assaulted my father-in-law on the street. And I didn't do it because I was angry. I didn't do it out of vengeance or retribution. I did it to get attention. I believed that I would be given a lawyer and an interpreter, and that they would be forced to do a child abuse investigation. But instead, I sat in a Polish prison for 11 months without seeing a lawyer. And when I did see a lawyer and go to court, they didn't care why I did what I did. They only cared that they had a, a case against me for what I had done. Um, so I ended up spending 50 months in Polish prison, and I was released June 18th, so 9 years ago today, 2015. And I just started up again. I started writing the current book. I ended up meeting my second wife, who, when I told her my story, she was just completely on board and just said, whatever we need to do, let's do it. And today we are still fighting for my first wife and my daughter.
Wow. That's quite powerful. So your daughter is still in Poland, and uh, how did you find out about the rituals? And were you invited to one of them, or is it something that she was very sloppy about so you could see the signs? How did you find out?
So I was not invited to them. I don't believe that any outsider could ask to be invited. What happened is, since the first week of our relationship with my first wife in 2004, I noticed signs that indicated she had trauma in her past. And at first, I thought it was incest. I thought it was borderline personality disorder. I was taking notes on her and studying, but I was also living life with her, and the cycles that I was experiencing. It was either really good or really bad. And when it was really bad, I just wanted it to go back to really good. And I also thought that whatever was in the past would stay in the past, that even if she was abused as a child, that wouldn't have repercussions today. I didn't understand trauma like I do today. And so then I saw more and more cycles of this, of her switching from "I love you" and "you're my world" to "I hate you." And then when my daughter was 3, and she's talking at that point, I have a good relationship with her. I would send her to Poland, and she would come back screaming about her PP, having bruises, having nightmares, tantrums, and many other signs of child abuse. And I would ask my wife, what is going on, and she wouldn't speak to me. And so I was alone with my wife, who I trusted in, I trusted her with all those female issues. I trusted her that she would tell me if something was wrong, and I was just up against a brick wall. So, um, the last time my daughter came back from Poland, she had all of those same signs again, and my wife was communicating with me for we were apart for 3 months because I was trying to get us back to the United States where I knew we would have support, and I sent them to Poland. And when we reconvened in the Netherlands, I walked in, I tried to kiss my wife, and she said, "I hate you and I've always hated you. My family is a cult. I'm taking her back to Poland for Christmas or New Year's because of mind control. I have Stockholm syndrome and the thing about the red herring." And so at that point, I didn't know what to think until 3 weeks later it happened. And during this time, I'm not even sure that it's my wife. I'm looking for marks on her body because I think that maybe she has a twin I don't know about. She's so completely different that I couldn't even be sure it was her. And so after they left and they were going back to Poland, that's when it clicked, and I continued my research, and I'm like, that's what that is. That it's dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder is caused by extreme trauma that starts at an early age, and that's what's happening. That's why my wife told me cult, mind control, Stockholm syndrome, and that's why my daughter's being abducted. There was really no other explanation for it. So and there's hundreds or thousands of other cases and people speaking up today of the same type of thing happening in their lives. So it was more of a process of identifying, when you're bird watching, like you're trying to identify the bird, and eventually you know what kind of bird it is after you've seen enough attributes, and that's how I knew.
Mm. So do you think that she wanted you because she wanted to escape the cult? She wanted like a normal man who's not part of the cult, but then realized that she couldn't handle that anymore, and that's how she got this. She realized she had Stockholm syndrome. Because I'm thinking, if she's part of a cult, why would she marry someone and have children with someone who's not part of the cult? Usually, they always remain within familiar circles.
I do believe that she wants out of the cult. I believe she wants our daughter out of the cult. And although I can't be sure, why she chose me, but her knowledge and vision, like in the of what's really happening in the spiritual realm, was way more than mine was. I thought it was just love at first sight, and when we met, we were engaged within a couple weeks. And just the things that she told me over the years, and she made me stronger, whereas she could have made me commit suicide. She was so much stronger than I was. But she was telling me things, um, teaching me things along the way that I couldn't have wrapped my head around at the time, and I don't know what I would have done if I had wrapped my head around it at the time. uh, but like during the last 3 weeks we were together, she was everything that she was doing was communicating with me. She was listening to Drake's song "Shut It Down" thousands of times in our kitchen, just over and over and over again. And I'm just like, shut what down? What are you trying to say to me? And she wanted to watch the movie Unthinkable. Like, she had my daughter hand me the Bible 2 days before they left, and just because I believe that she, having grown up in this darkest of dark places, knows that only good is the answer. This is something that is is so hidden in plain sight and so evil that there's only one way to to win in this situation, and like that has made me turn towards God. Like I don't believe that there's any organization, anybody in the world that's going to do anything, but I do believe that good wins over evil.
No, I've got to agree with that. Um, so you reckon your daughter was being essayed by this cult?
Yes. So I was a stay-at-home dad the last year that we were together, and I was I was developing curriculum for her. I was looking at going back to get my PhD in curriculum writing. I was just she was my best friend, and I was her best friend, and she was the healthiest kid I knew. At 3 years old, she was adding and subtracting and had her alphabet down, and just very smart. And then I'd send her to Poland. She'd come back, and for 2 weeks after coming back from Poland, multiple times, anytime it was time to shower, she would just scream in terror, "Not my pee pee, not my pee pee." And she had a big bruise on her right buttock that my wife said, "Tell daddy where you got that from." And my daughter looked at my wife like, "Are you sure?" And my wife confirmed, and she said the word grandpa in Polish. And she came back speaking baby talk. She came back with night terrors, with wetting her bed, uh, and just so obviously something was happening in Poland. Um, and I didn't know what it could be, like, because I had a blindness about it. I couldn't first of all, I couldn't understand what somebody could do with a 3-year old, and I couldn't fathom that this could be happening in my home under my wife's watch.
Mm. Wow, that's deep, man. That's deep. Did you ever get a chance to like see where their head office was or their base is, the cult, or are you just blind to that information?
I did not get a chance to see that. What I saw, um, I believe it's intergenerational. I believe that my wife's mother and grandmother are involved,
Mm,
and that her grandfather, in addition to her father, is a perpetrator. And that was one reason that I know her grandfather's a perpetrator, because when I came back, I had a camouflage hat on, and when I put the hat on, my daughter started having a panic attack, and my wife said, you can't wear that hat." She was just like adamant, "You cannot wear that hat." And then later, she gave me pictures of my wife's grandfather wearing a camouflage hat. Or I would pop a can of beer, and my daughter would have a panic attack, and my wife would say, "Don't worry, that's daddy, that's not grandpa." Things like that. So I don't know how big and wide it goes. I believe it's bigger than my first wife's family. um, there were other weird things that happened when I was in Poland. Like, my wife would tell me that the Catholic priest, was mad at her dad because her sister hadn't visited him soon enough, or recently enough. And just the way that my wife was speaking to me, I knew that it didn't have to do with some religious requirement. But I try not to speculate about how wide it could go. I just know that my wife told me her family's part of a cult.
wow. So obviously it's been how many years now? If I've lost track of how many years. How many years it been since you last saw your daughter?
So we're in the 14th year. It'll be 14 years on December 27th of this year.
Wow,
Uh,
wow.
my daughter's now 17 years old, so this is the last year she's a minor,
Mm,
and it's like, I've wanted to stop it every day since it happened, and that's why I took matters into my own hands and ended up locked up in Poland for 50 months. Um, and I just realized that it's bigger than anything I can do, anybody I can reach out to, anything I can write. So, I mean, every step of the way, all I'm doing is doing what I feel is best that I can do as a dad, what I
mm,
should do. So I don't regret going to Poland and getting arrested, because I did the best I could with the knowledge I had. I just entirely miscalculated how the world works, and I thought there was justice. I thought I would have a wise judge, things like that. And just like when I met my second wife in 2018, at, prior to that, I was living on my dad's farm, and I had decided I was going to become a monk. I was just praying and fasting and in my Bible and farming, and I didn't want anything else except to go towards that power, which I know can help. And then my second wife, walks into my life, and I talk to her for about an hour, and I just tell her my whole story, because I that's what I do with anyone I meet. At some point, it comes up, because they'll ask, why were you in Poland, or why don't you see your daughter anyways? But when I told her this, she was the only person I had ever met who just, you know started crying and was just like, okay, Ian, what do we need to do? And from there, we just started doing everything together. She helped me write the book. She did it, edited it, and that's our mission. We are we have one goal, and that is to free these people from this. Get my daughter and my first wife out of this cult.
Mhm. So once she turns 18, would there be some kind of law that will support your mission? Is there something that the American embassy or the American government can do with the Polish government to get her to come and speak to you or something?
No, so when she turns 18, I think that will be worse potentially. Um, because the problem goes back to the reason why my first wife took our daughter, which was because of trauma-based mind control. So so she didn't want to take our daughter. She told me it was going to happen, and then it happened. And like during that period where I was trying to get her help, and she was telling me over and over again it's going to happen, and I'm saying no, over my dead body, let's go get help. Like I had uncontrollable diarrhea. I was sweating, so I'd have to change the sheets in the middle of the night. I thought she was demon possessed, and I prayed for the first time in my adult life because that's how scared I was. And then it happened. So it's like trauma based mind control that starts at birth is something that is very difficult, if not impossible, to get out of. There are people who do get out of it somehow, but I believe that if they maintain control over the years, that it's pretty much impossible to get out of. So the same situation is going to be where my daughter is. The fact that she is legally an adult, in January of next year, it won't matter because she's still in Poland with the cult. And the U.S. Embassy has told me since day one that it doesn't matter that she was born in New London, Connecticut, because her mother's Polish. When she's in Poland, she's considered to be 100% Polish. So they never did a welfare check. They never did anything to help me.
Man, sorry to hear that, man. Sorry to hear that. So what are some of the methods that you tried? Because I'm sure as a father, naturally, you must have tried many, many, many methods. What are some of the methods you tried? Did you try and track down the headquarters? Did you try and track down the grandparents? And you told me obviously you met the father-in-law, you beat him up. Were there other methods that you tried that were like a bit illegal or, things that obviously you had to take into your own hands?
So when during the 4 months when I was trying to get help, I wrote to every news agency, every international organization that I could find. I filed a Hague abduction report because under international law, which Poland and the United States they're both signed on this law. Um, it's illegal to take a child from one country to another without both parents signing off on it. So that's what I initially wanted to do was go the legal route, um, get a lawyer, and have them return my daughter to the Netherlands where she'd go to court. But the U.S. State Department told me after I filed the paperwork that it could take 2 years for that to go through. And as a dad, I couldn't fathom waiting 2 years. So I continued. I contacted a human rights organization, human trafficking organization in Cambodia, and what they did is that all they can do is contact the local Polish police, and the local police aren't equipped or knowledgeable to deal with ritual abuse. What they did is they knocked on the door. They asked my wife if everything's okay. She said yes, and then they did a walkthrough of the home. Didn't find any signs of abuse, so they ended their investigation. So then, when I was planning on going to Poland, I didn't know what I was going to do. Um, my what I wanted to do was do what the duty officer and the embassy had originally told me to do and reabduct my daughter and get her. I was going to try to get her to the embassy in Berlin because that's about an hour from where they are. So I had maps. I know where my wife's grandfather's summer house is, which the way that she talked about that home, I believed that abuse was happening there. So I had maps from there. I brought like a compass and binoculars. Uh, I was on a mission, but when I was driving to Poland, I just thought, like, I'm going to a country where, I don't blend in, I don't speak the language, I'm all by myself, and to try to get my then 4-year-old daughter into a car away from whatever adult was caring for her in an hour into another country, into Germany, just seemed more ridiculous than what I did, which was just create a scene, lump them up a little bit, and then wait to speak to an attorney. So I chose to assault my father-in-law, and that and but I didn't see an attorney for 11 months, and when I did, the translator I was given couldn't understand me. The attorney was a public defender who was just going off of the facts in the prosecutor's file, and I didn't have a chance. My my first wife's family is well respected. Um, Her godfather works in the court in the town that I was charged in, and I asked for another venue. They didn't give it to me. So then, while I was incarcerated, I wrote letters every day. I appealed to the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France. I wrote to the embassy many times, the U.S. embassy. I wrote to Polish Child Protective Services, but because I was the criminal locked up at that point, nobody listened to me, and because my family wasn't on my side, I just didn't have a chance. Um, so from there, I I've always kept journals and wrote everything down, and so I just realized that I was working on a book, and that's what I kept doing, and I went through different stages after I was released, where I hesitated in publishing the book because I felt like I was taking it upon myself that I'm going to write this book and then something big is going to happen. So I put it off. I burned all my notebooks, or most of my notebooks. And then after I met my second wife, it just hit me. I knew what the story should be. And that's what we've been working on since we met in 2018.
Wow.
And I continue to write to people. I continue to send letters to the embassies and to the Netherlands, Poland, the US. I've recently written to the Polish version of the FBI and the Polish National Police, but they just say they cannot do anything. Um,
Wow.
and so, I try out of the formality, but I don't know what's going to break this open. I'm just going to keep pressing forward with what is on my heart to do.
Do you think your daughter's still alive?
I do think she's still alive. I have some fairly recent pictures of her. I know she's a runner. Um, I know I can because of the internet. I know what school she's going to. And my ex father-in-law is a bigwig in the city. Um, there's often live streams of him doing some kind of auction or some kind of event. He's like an MC. Um, so he's pictured with the president of the city, and he's all over the place on social media. So I know, I as of you know this year sometime, I know she's still alive.
Do you think they've told her about you, or do you think they've just kind of kept you a secret in her life?
So I think they've made her hate me, um, and that anybody who knows about child development would know that a 3-year-old cannot hate their father at she's now 17. She wouldn't hate me on her own. It has to be because of what has been fed to her. Um, but yeah, I believe that that's what they've done, the same way they did it to my wife, to where she communicated with me for 3 months saying, I love you, you're my world, I can't wait till we're back together. And then the moment I tried to kiss her, it was, I hate you and I've always hated you. And when I asked her about those 3 months of communication, she said, well, that was my plan. And it's just like, well, that doesn't make any sense, except that I think that she was setting me up so that when I wrote this book, people can see that there's 3 months of this communication of just extreme love letters. Like, I've never received love letters like that. And then the moment we're back, within 2 days, I'm trying to get help. and I'm sending people emails saying I'm terrified. My wife has my daughter's passport and says she's taking her back to Poland. I don't know what to do. So there's that communication, which in my book isn't just me writing the story. It's documented communication of emails going back and forth to people.
So if you were to go there today and go to your father-in-law's house, because obviously you've been there before, so you know their address, what do you think will happen?
I believe I would be locked up. Um, I believe I believe that I already spent 50 months in the Polish prison system, and because of my book being released, they absolutely hate me. They're now on the attack against me again because of the book, and people like my mother are still on their side. Um, and my although she won't even read my book. She's decided a long time ago. She's built upon that, and now she refuses to revert and think about it again. So I believe that if I went to Poland today because of my book, they would find some reason to lock me up,
So,
and it would.
sorry to cut you. You said your own mother believes your ex-wife.
Yes.
What did your ex-wife say about you? Because obviously you said what you believe is your truth, which is that they've got a satanic cult and they've got your 3-year-old daughter in the satanic cult and they've abducted her and taken her to Poland without your permission. What was the story that they said about you?
She said that she escaped from me in fear of her and our daughter's lives, that my drug use had completely messed up my mind and created just a terror system in my home. Um, and I don't know exactly what my mother believes. In the Polish court, what they believed was escape for their lives. I think my mother took a lesser version of that and just thought it was like a difficult breakup. Um, but I don't really know because my mother's never spoken to me about it, and all I know is what the court paperwork says. And my whole point the whole time has been, you know, I don't care what you think about me. I'll volunteer for the electric chair if you would just evaluate my daughter. You know, I don't expect you to believe me, but also don't believe them. You know, don't
Mm.
believe her. And nobody follows that logic. They just say, no, you're the bad guy. Period. And it's gone on like that for almost 14 years now. So I don't know what my mother exactly thinks. It's one of the hardest parts of this is that one of the people who should know you, and know that you're incapable of those things is on that side.
Mm.
And because she's never spoken to me about it, I don't know what she specifically thinks.
What about your
But whatever it is was enough.
what about your father? Was your father around at the time?
Yes.
And he
So
believes
my
it as well?
yeah, he also believed the same type of thing. And I have emails from my mother and my father to my first wife because I got through the process of discovery during my trial. I was able to see all of the documents, and I have emails. My mother thanking my first wife for getting to safety with my daughter. My dad saying that I was in a fantasy that I had created, and it was nonsense. Like I was living in Europe by myself with my family for 3 years, away from everyone else. No one else knew my first wife, and when this happened, they just sided with her, and part of it was because when it happened, I realized that my 3-year-old daughter's headed back to where she's being abused. And so I was frantic. I was lashing out. I was saying, God, help me. And when they didn't help me, and when I could tell that they were talking to my first wife behind my back, that made me just, yell at them and say, you guys are idiots. You need to help me. And that didn't help my case because then I seemed like I was being irrational, and it made it harder to believe me because I'm lashing out. But
Mm.
that I just now when I talk to my dad, I just say, Dad, you have to realize, where was my daughter? She was in my home and then she wasn't, and I knew where she was headed, and that did freak me out.
Mm. You know, it fascinates me because I'm thinking if your parents believed your ex-wife over you, then wouldn't they have been a little bit suspicious for the fact that for the past 14 years they've had no communication with their granddaughter?
So my dad has had no communication with his granddaughter. My mother has had communication throughout the entire time, and my second wife and I just found that out, because when she was angry, she said that she does have communication. She still says, "Oh, I know your first wife," and it's just like, how can you say you know her? I was married to her for 7 years. You speak to her over Skype a couple times a year, and you see what she wants you to see. But it's just the decisions that they made, and I think because they've made very hard decisions and gone with it for years and years now, that it's hard to like try to unravel that and realize how big of a mistake they could have made.
Mm.
So they stick to it.
Wow. Do you think they could have done any kind of like magic on your mother and your father for them to have that standpoint?
I do think so. I think that my first wife is a very amazing person, and when she was on my side, I was very happy to have her on my side. Uh, she was able to change people's minds. She was able to get done what we needed done in just amazing ways that I would just be like, wow, I'm glad you're mine. And then to me, for the 3 weeks that we were together before the abduction, where she's telling me she's taking our daughter back to the cult, and I'm saying no, and she has our daughter's passport, and I'm with my daughter every day, and I've made a decision. I am not going to let my daughter out of my sight. But then on that last day, my wife, I came back from playing outside in the snow with my daughter all day. My wife was texting me saying, I want you to come home. I'm supposed to take her to the store. And my daughter didn't want to go home, but eventually I said, mommy loves you, and she probably has dinner ready. So I went home. My wife was standing at the top of the stairs, dressed, ready to go for the first time in those 3 weeks, and I knew something was going on. So she said, I want to take her to the store. And I said, well, we can go together, but because you have her passport and what you've been telling me, I can't let you leave alone with her. So I sat down on the couch and started my daughter's favorite movie, made her popcorn and tea. And over the next hour, my wife convinced me to let her take my daughter to the library down the street to see my daughter's friend. And while this is happening, I feel like a deer in headlights. It was like I lost my fear. I thought my wife was my friend again. I was more interested in how beautiful her legs were, and just thankful that she was like looking at me a particular way. And so I'm standing in the kitchen. My daughter walks up to me with my wife standing behind me. She gives me this big hug, and I like had to peel her arms off me because she didn't want to let go. And I watched my daughter walk down the stairs, and I watched my wife walk down the stairs, and I had no indication until after they were gone, and I was on the phone with my friend that it actually happened. So I believe that something happened to me there. There's Whether it was some kind of hypnotism or something like that. Like I just completely let my guard down and was happy to let them go. And then later I realized, oh my gosh, like they're gone. And I do think that people who don't have any understanding of evil and witchcraft and things like that are susceptible to these things, and that my first wife can play my parents like a musical instrument. So
I 100% believe that these things are real. Spells and brainwashing and witchcraft. I definitely do believe these things are real. And I mean, with me, my heart breaks because the way you've just described the last time you saw them, I don't know what I would do if I was in your shoes. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't know what I would do if I was in your shoes. Man, as a man, how did you slowly come out of that dark space? Were you like crying all the time? Did you quit your job? How did you come out of that dark space? Because that doesn't sound like an easy thing to get over.
it wasn't easy. No. So I just like I immediately sprinted to the police department and just kept trying to move to the next level of help. And I considered going to Poland right away. I I ran all of the possibilities that I could think of through my head, and just what should I do as a dad. And so I considered just leaving right away and going to Poland. But then I just thought that that would be a bad move because I'd be in the country alone, and I would just be out of my element, and that they would crush me over there. So I waited and I kept trying to get help. And my parents were pretending that they were helping me for a few weeks. So I had some indications that they weren't helping me, but I couldn't tell. So I wanted to believe they were helping me. They told me they were going to help me get a lawyer, so I believed them. And every day I'm waking up, and I wasn't working because I had been the stay-at-home dad. So I just at this point, all of my energies went into doing this, and I went to the Dutch police a few more times and just begged them to stop them from leaving the country if they were still in the country. Um, I was constantly in communication with the U.S. Embassy. I reached out to lawyers and the press, um, and then once it got to the point where okay, nobody's listening and nobody's gonna listen, and I've hit all of my bases. I've even written emails to President Obama. Then I'm just like, well, as a dad, I have to make them listen, and I don't know what the details of that are, but they're gonna listen to me. And I was just ready to just lay my life on the line. Like I didn't care if they never let me out of prison. What all I cared about and care about is my daughter. And I think that's people say, if someone ever hurts my daughter, I'll kill them, but they don't understand what they're talking about. And I think that a lot of people are just saying it. But for me, like I don't think that killing people is the right answer, but I think that it's an all bets are off. Like that person is more valuable than anything else in the world for me. And if I don't do what I need to do or should do, then I'm nothing. I'm not a man, I'm not a dad. And so I love her, and I'm just fighting the way that I believe is going to get the results that we all need.
Yeah. So you see your wife. What if your wife was delusional? And what if she said those things to you? And what if you were to find out that maybe your daughter wasn't in a satanic cult where they were essaying her? What if your wife was just saying that because she's mad?
Well, I know she wasn't just mad because I had all of that communication from the previous 3 months, and I was speaking to her, and before I left to go to the United States and sent them to Poland, we were dancing together. Just she was the happiest woman I had ever known. So the difference was that I sent her back to Poland, and whatever happened there, then it came back to my home again. So like I'd seen the cycle many times. So I just in order for her to go from being the happiest woman that I'd ever known in my home to going to Poland and coming back and being someone that I thought was possessed with demons, and just and saying the exact opposite of what she had been saying for the entire time, and telling me she was taking our daughter to the cult, and the fact that our daughter had every sign and symptom of a child who'd been abused. um, and then the fact that it happened, right? Like I'm not a perfect man. I have my flaws, um, even more so back then. But I was just like I was a normal guy who was just out of his league, and my daughter was taken away, and people were looking at me as if I'm the monster. So I'm just like, well, I'm not the monster. The monster has to be in Poland where they were for those 3 months.
Mm,
The monster has to be where my wife came back from, distraught and absolutely miserable and unable to communicate, unwilling to get help. And who's giving my daughter the bruises and the
oh
fear that someone's going to touch her pee pee?
gosh. So if your daughter was in front of you right now, what would you say to her?
I would say to her the same thing I used to say when I was pushing her on the swing set. Just hold on, don't ever let go, and I love you. And and I believe that even though she was almost 4 when she was taken, and I don't remember much from when I was 4 years old. I think that because I was her dad for the first 4 years of her life, that she knows love, and she knows who I am, and she knows that I'm not going to ever stop. She knows that I'm going to fight as long as I have breath, and that I'm not afraid of anything other than failing as her dad. And I love her. And the other thing I used to say to her before I put her to bed was, I love you to the moon and back. And I take her over to her windowsill and prop her up there, and we try to find the moon. And I would say that, I love you to the moon and back. And sometimes I would say, I love you to Poland and back. And I just kind of like freestyling the phrase. And that's where we're at. Like, we're we're on our way back from the moon, and it's time for Ann back. And I believe that this brick wall is going to crumble, and I don't know exactly how, but I don't believe that things in life happen randomly. I think there's a purpose, and that there is a way through.
That's beautiful. So, you said obviously you wrote a book. Is it your first book, or do you have other books?
It is my first book.
Okay, what's the?
Um,
Sorry, what?
so it's called "I Love You Like One: A Letter to My Daughter Abducted by a Cult," and it's long. It's well, the text is about 500 pages, but altogether it's 600 pages with the appendix and the works cited and the table of contents. And but I've basically just laid out everything in documentary fashion. With also the first two parts of the book are basically me being extremely vulnerable about my who I am and where I've been and what I've done, and just opening up about things that are like the things that I am least excited about exposing to the world. But the reason that I have done that is because I realize that what they're saying about me. So I just want to say, okay, well, this is me. Like, this is where I've been, and I have done some things that I'm not proud of. I have done a lot of drugs in the past, but then we also have this documentation which shows that their story is not true, and that my daughter was abducted, and that she should have been evaluated. And then it shows me becoming aware of this deep evil that I was previously unaware of, and where I took that, and where I get my hope from, and what I'm going to do about knowing what I know. Um, and I don't think it's possible for anyone to read the entire book and come away thinking, oh, Ian's the bad guy. You might think that I'm a little bit out there. You might think that I've had experiences that are crazy compared to other people's experiences, but those have all just built me to who I am today. I'm not into any of that. I'm different than I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I've learned, and ever since this has happened, I've had a one-track mind. I have been honing my sights on what I believe is the answer, and trying to figure that out.
That's very, very interesting. Now, before we conclude the interview, I wanted to ask you, how did you learn to trust again? You said you got a second wife. What happened to you? You must have been very, very paranoid. You must have been very skeptical. How did you learn to trust again?
So I was paranoid and skeptical, and I kept my wedding ring from my first wife on my finger, even during the first few months that I was seeing my second wife. And I sent emails to friends and saying, is it happening again? Am I being seduced? Am I going to make a mistake? And I just I took it slowly with her. Uh, when I met her, I didn't believe that I could be with another woman. I didn't want to be with another woman, and it because I didn't enter into that relationship because I wanted a girlfriend or anything that goes along with that. It was more like the more time that I spent with her, the more sure I was that God had put her in my life, and just who she was somebody I'd never encountered before. Her honesty, her natural wisdom, her complete vulnerability. Like there was no pretense to her. There was no hiding or lying or anything like that. And so just over the course of taking it slow and getting to know her, and with really no intention of doing anything else, it became clear that we were supposed to proceed together. Um, and yeah, it was very difficult at first, but it was more like I just observed her and took it very slow. And once I saw who she was at her core, I j- I believed that we were meant to do this together. That there's a plan for both of us. That and I couldn't do it all on my own. There's things that a man can't do without a partner. There's things that got left off with my first wife that couldn't be healed without a second wife.
Mm.
Things that I needed to figure out and work through, and traumas, and I think PTSD to some degree. It was extremely difficult, and because of who my second wife is, we're able to do all those things, and I'm able to grow, and she's an amazing person, an amazing partner, and just has dedicated her life to helping my first wife and our daughter, which in and of itself is mind blowing to me.
Mm.
I don't, I wouldn't do that, I don't think, but she's decided to do that.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And one last question as well. Did your parents ever try to disrupt that love that you found, the second love that you found, by trying to brainwash her against you, saying that, have you heard what happened with his first wife? Have you heard what happened with his daughter? Are you sure you want to get into this marriage? Blah, 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 blah.
No, so they did the opposite. They thought that when I started a life with my second wife, that I would forget the first wife and just move on, and that I they still thought that I had, that I was not well, and that I was focusing on something that I shouldn't be focusing on, that I was wrong. And so they assumed that my second wife would help me to forget about my first wife. But interestingly, now my mother-in-law is hearing now she's hearing the accusations against me, and it's becoming a powerful conversation starter, because my mother-in-law is going to my mother and saying, why didn't you tell me about these accusations? If Iain is who you think he is, you should have told me. And my mother's saying, well, he's not dangerous. And my mother-in-law saying, well, if what is being said about Iain is true, then you should have told me. And I think it's great, because it's it's confusing my mother to where she doesn't really know what she believes. Is my second wife safe, or isn't she? Decide. And if you believe what you say you believe about the first wife, then you have a responsibility to tell these people, right? Like for my second wife to be married to me, and my mother is acting as if I'm a good guy.
Mm.
There's a it doesn't add up. So my that's something that we need to further explore, because I think it would help my mother to break through what she has thought, because she can't reconcile those two beliefs at the
Mm.
same time.
Wow. Wow, that's mad. That's mad. But just before we wrap it up, where can people find your book? Where can people contact you?
So my book is on Amazon, Amazon UK, Amazon.com, and it's also on my website, which is iloveyoulikeone.com. Um, so that's where, and I'm selling a paperback, I'm selling the Kindle, and I have the PDF available, which people can donate if they want, or if they want to send me $1, I'll send them the PDF, because I want the book to get out to whoever wants to read it, and I don't want the cost to be an issue.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Iain, it's been a lovely conversation, and I really, really hope that there's a light at the end of the tunnel at some stage in your life between you and your daughter. And I wish you an amazing life with you and your new wife. But I really hope that you find some answers with the situation with your daughter.
Thank you, sir. It's been amazing getting to talk to you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a lovely day. God bless.
Yeah, you too. God bless you.
All right. Bye-bye.
The Drazzy Show.